On May 26, 1973, a gathering of 9 jumpers showed up at the city of Mount Gambier in South Australia. Their expectation was to go cavern jumping at the shaft, a 3 feet, 0.91 m wide sinkhole opening, prompting a huge submerged cave. The shaft was popular among jumpers for its unmistakable water and intriguing inside structure. The entry to the shaft was found in 1938 in a field known as Thompson's Enclosure, when one of a group of ponies staggered over a little opening around 1 foot, 3 m across. The opening was subsequently opened to around 3 ft 1 m for investigation access. The main make a plunge. The opening was made by a neighborhood jumper during the 1960s, and great many jumps were made later. The fundamental office of the cavern is around 460 ft, 140 m, long and 260 feet, 80 m, wide, with 2 enormous passages initiating from one or the other side of a stone heap. Jumpers and their hardware must be brought down into the opening to investigate the water. The name, the shaft, is professed to be gotten from the brilliant shaft, the 8 jumpers meaning to wander into the shaft in May of 1973 were John H. Buckerman, Peter S. Burr, Kin, Christine, Glenn, and Stephen Millett, alongside Larry Reynolds, Gordon G. Roberts, and Robert J. Smith. The specific way to express their last names might vary. The gathering part, Joan Harper, concluded she wouldn't jump and would rather stay alongside the sinkhole, planning food and helping the gathering in alternate ways. On May 27, 1973, the gathering marked the guest book at the farmhouse of B. V. Ashby and finished a fruitful plunge at the sinkhole. During the plunge, they expanded a shot line, roughly 150 feet, 46 m, into the water. A shot line is kind of plunging line, comprising of a weight, a line, and a float. The line is involved by jumpers as a visual and material reference to move between the surface and the plunge site, all the more securely and as a controlled situation for in water, organized decompression stops. The shot line arrived at the essential focal point, known as the rock heap, a focal heap of limestone rubble straightforwardly underneath the sinkhole entrance. They momentarily investigated the edge of the stone heap prior to surfacing. With their shot line currently set up, the gathering intended to return the following morning and keep investigating the sinkhole. The gathering showed up at the sinkhole on the morning of May 28, 1973, in the wake of topping off their breathing chambers at Mount Gambier. The gathering immediately dropped to the stone heap. They had not intended to investigate past a point called the edge, a tight and descending slanting continuation of the cavern on one side of the principal chamber, a long way from the regular light shaft given by the sinkhole opening. The stone heap was viewed as the limit for safe sporting plunging. The encompassing sinkhole was dim, neglected, canvassed in free sediment and limestone rubble. The sinkhole went on descending to profundities where the impacts of nitrogen narcosis become outrageous on the off chance that breathing gas isn't weakened by helium. Nitrogen narcosis is a change of awareness that happens while plunging extremely profound. It is brought about by the sedative impacts of specific gases at high tension. It delivers a state like tipsiness. Narcosis can be totally switched in no time flat by climbing to a swallower profundity. Indeed, even at the profundities of the stone heap border, the impacts of narcosis would have been huge. This might have been influencing the judgment of the jumpers. Despite the fact that the underlying plunge went without a hitch, the 8 jumpers dismissed a few perceived well-being methodology right off the bat in the plunge. The shot line didn't stretch out the entire way to the cave floor and was not furnished with additional air tanks, nor were the jumpers arranged with sufficient air, the executive's procedures. The gathering had not laid out unambiguous plunging accomplices. A man part of the gathering by the name of Robert Smith who had plunged at the sinkhole on 8 past events, had laid out a large portion of the gathering's jump plan. Robert was not expecting a portion of the individuals from the gathering to wander as far into the cavern as they did. Just 4 of the 8 jumpers wound up returning to the surface that day. It took the sorting out of the different records of the 4 enduring jumpers to sort out what turned out badly during the plunge. The records are as per the following. At the border of the stone heap, around 180 ft, 55 m, profound Robert Smith, age 26, started to feel the impacts of nitrogen narcosis. As an accomplished jumper, Robert was intimately acquainted with the side effects of nitrogen narcosis. Robert Smith indicated to his gathering that he was getting back to the highest point of the stone heap. The gathering flagged that they planned to investigate. Smith remained by the stone heap, orbiting it for about 8 minutes while looking for creature bones. He then saw the light of Glenn, age 25, getting back from where the others had headed. Glenn had effectively been checking his air and realized that he was in a tough spot. He had endeavored to tap his sister Christine on the arm and advise her that her time was additionally up, yet the two were isolated before he could. Robert and Glenn met and surfaced together. At the point when they surfaced, they found that Larry Reynolds had proactively gotten back from his plunge. A portion of a moment later, Peter Burr surfaced with basically no air left in his tank. Realizing the others would have comparatively low air supplies, Glenn immediately put on an extra tank and gotten back to the water. He plummeted to a profundity of 225 feet, 69 m, where the bluff started to drop off. At the edge, he found his sibling Stephen's light and camera. A lot of residue had been upset and perceivability had been decreased to 0 almost. Glenn had no real option except to get back to the surface. When he surfaced, an emergency vehicle had shown up at the cavern. Peter Burr got back to the sinkhole for another look, however tracked down no one. By then, the gathering knew that they were searching for bodies and not survivors. Larry Reynolds referenced that, when he was pivoting to get back to the surface, he saw Christine, age 19, and Gordon, age 28, endeavor to climb rapidly back to the stone heap. Be that as it may, rather than climbing along the incline they went down, they swam straight up, conceivably on the grounds that they were concerned their air would run out soon. The 2 jumpers swam straightforwardly vertically into a vault in the roof which had no exit. Larry Reynolds revealed seeing their lights wildly looking for an exit. As indicated by Larry, Christine and Gordon looked terrified. This was the last time the 2 were seen. They were probably experiencing nitrogen narcosis and encompassed in residue permitting negligible perceivability. It is imagined that the 2 neglected to find an exit, depleted their air supply, and suffocated. Their bodies were subsequently tracked down together beneath the roof vault that they had neglected to escape. Further down and around a similar time, one enduring jumper said they saw John Bockerman of their gathering swimming emphatically descending further into the cavern. John was logical under the impacts of extreme nitrogen narcosis and may have been uninformed that he was swimming to his downfall. His body was situated around 20 feet, 6.1 m, further from where he was most recently seen, and was at the best profundity of the 4 casualties. The 4th casualty, Stephen, age 22, may have been seen lost underneath the cavern roof, not long from now, before the enduring jumpers surfaced. Despite the fact that his light and camera were found profound at the foundation of the stone heap, his body was tracked down under a shade at a profundity of just 50 feet, 15 m, contrasted and different casualties. Little is had some significant awareness of Stephen's last minutes. A hunt of the cavern by the police submerged recuperation crew to a profundity of 200 feet, 61 m, was started on May 29, 1973, the day after the mishap. The pursuit was brief, and no bodies were found. The group knew that they were underprepared for a make-a-plunge such circumstances. A subsequent endeavor was made on May 30, again fruitless. The police search was at last delayed as the group looked for maritime mastery on the plunge, and the preparation for which was supposed to require a while. The next January, the landowners of the sinkhole allowed a TV film team, making a narrative on cave, making a plunge the lower southeast, to enter the sinkhole. On January 22, 1974, the team plummeted to a profundity of 50 feet, 15 m, and, utilizing proficient lighting hardware, enlightened the cavern like sunlight. A professional glancing the way of two of his colleagues and saw what gave off an impression of being a third individual behind them. Further review uncovered that it was a body in a wetsuit. The group quickly surfaced together to report their discoveries. On the morning of January 23, 1974, police showed up at the sinkhole and pigeon to a profundity of 50 feet, 15 m, where they found a body drifting under an edge against the inclined cave rooftop. The body was towed out and later distinguished as Stephen. The landowners of the shaft, becoming progressively awkward with the excess 3 bodies stuck on their property, moved toward a novice plunging group from Melbourne to start recuperation endeavors. In any case, the police jumping group was likewise concluding their recuperation arrangements around a similar time. On Walk 9, 1974 RG, Trainer and a group of jumpers entered the shaft, furnished with considerably further developed plunging gear. At a profundity of 185 feet, 56 m, Trainer saw a body beneath him, laying on its back. Furthermore, a second body straightforwardly underneath it. These were the groups of Christine and Gordon. 20 feet, 6.1 m, more profound. Trainer likewise found the group of John Bockerman underneath a stone edge. The following day, the jumpers endeavored to return and recuperate the bodies, yet didn't succeed, and the work was cancelled after the water turned out to be excessively dim. A few additional plunges were endeavored, yet the bodies couldn't be moved. At long last, on the third day of jumping, the bodies were found, and Christine and Gordon were recuperated. Endeavors were made to recuperate John's body, which was the most profound. The next morning, however, the jumpers cut short the recuperation in light of the beginning of nitrogen narcosis. The jumpers were sent home for a month to recuperate from the drawn-out endeavors and to additional train for the last body recuperation. At last, John Bockerman's body was recuperated from the cavern on April 9, 1974, around 11 months after the mishap. The coroner, exceptional Judge R.F. Stirs up, presumed that the 4 jumpers exceeded their base time, ran out of air, and lapsed from hypoxia. That's what a further finding was, albeit every one of the jumpers professed to be capable, and 4 of them were educators. Not a solitary one of them were capable cavern jumpers, and that no proper security insurances had been taken. Following the mishap, Robert Smith claimed that he encountered extreme nitrogen narcosis at 180 feet, 55 m, on the underlying plunge, yet encountered no opiate impacts in the wake of getting an extra tank and getting back to profundity to look for the others. He additionally professed to be competent at plunging to profundities up to 300 feet, 91 m, without encountering striking opiate impacts. The tank he took on the principal jump had been filled at Mount Gambier, while the extra tank taken for his second plunge to look for the missing jumpers had been filled back in Sydney. Smith is cited as saying there was some kind of problem with the neighborhood air, and continued to guarantee that pollution during the filling of the chambers at Mount Gambier might have been the reason for the 4 fatalities. A specialist in jumping medication, Dr. A. B. Mac. Kant, was entrusted with the assessment of the chambers recuperated from Robert Smith and the remainder of the party. After broad assessment and research center tests on the chamber contents, he reasoned that the charges of sullied air were completely without establishment. Also, that it was exclusively the disregard of security estimates that eventually prompted the lost lives.